All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Emily Geiger. Emily, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I think a lot of Yoopers' hearts. Talking a lot about the beer world. But before we get into all that, are you originally from the UP?
No, I actually am from Western Michigan, so
Okay.
Muskegon,
Okay,
precisely.
Muskegon area. All right.
Yep.
So, I guess how did you make your way up here to the UP then?
Um, so in 2007 is when I made my move to Houghton for school at Michigan Tech. Um, my parents both are Northern alumni, and so we'd come up to the UP for summer vacations pretty much throughout my whole youth. Um, so yeah, I checked out Michigan Tech on one of their college visit days with my dad, and then I decided this is where I wanted to go. And so I've been up here since 2007 for school.
Okay, so you came up in 2007 and you haven't left.
No, it's a wonderful place.
It is. It
It's
is.
magical.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that you got your degrees at Tech in biochemistry and molecular biology, but what sort of drew you towards like fermentation science and yeast as like your specialties?
Um, so the sciences in general, I've always been attracted to. I'm a very objective person. So I think science, or the field of science, aligns with my personality. But as far as fermentation science goes, in high school, you take chemistry and you take biology. But at Tech, that was my first exposure to microbiology. So this whole world that you can't even, see with your naked eye, and that I pretty much didn't really know existed. So I became really enthused with microbiology, and I ended up minoring in it. But then just the applications of it, such as in brewing, kind of solidified my studies with
Okay.
microbiology.
So as you were going through school and doing this, were you working for KBC already, or did that come when you like finished your schooling, or when did that kind of come along in the process?
So I was the opportunity to work at the Keweenaw Brewing Company began when I was in graduate school, actually.
Okay.
So the brewery actually reached out to the microbiology professor at Tech and looked for recommendations. So Dr. Bagley, she's a huge mentor of mine, but she lined me up with this part-time job at the brewery as their staff microbiologist. And so I've been I started that in 2012, I believe, in the summer. So I've been there ever since, and I love it. Love my job there.
What exactly does a staff microbiologist do at a brewery?
Well, I think it can vary, at different breweries. For the Keweenaw Brewing Company, you could say I'm a yeast manager. So I propagate all the yeast that they brew with. I check their fermentations for quality. And then obviously we have different critical control points that we check throughout the brewing process. So I pretty much just collect data for each batch of beer that's through that place.
Okay, interesting. Speaking of yeast, obviously, I mean, that's what we're here to talk about in your own business that you have, Craft Cultures. So for those listening in that may not be familiar, what exactly is Craft Cultures?
So Craft Cultures is a small company I started in 2013. This was after my time at KBC for a while. I think it was about a year. During my time there, we switched from buying yeast for the brewery to propagating our own. And I started to realize there was this huge, gap in the industry. For example, Michigan is a great beer state, and we did not have a local yeast provider. So in 2013, I started this business that provides liquid yeast cultures to brewers, commercial brewers, and to home brewers. And then I also provide services such as education on yeast health and maintenance and quality control.
Okay. So, I'm naive, and I'm sure a lot of people are listening that maybe like beer, but are naive to the brewing process. What is it about yeast that's like so important to does that give you like the different flavor, or I guess why is that so important to the process?
So, in addition to the malt bill that's used and the different mashing programs that brewers are using, yeast are a way to control the flavor and aroma of a beer.
Okay.
Each style has traditional brewing strains that are used to brew specific styles. One of the products that we offer is liquid yeast cultures. And so we have a variety of traditional brewing strains that you can use to make different styles of beer.
Okay. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So you started this around like 2013. Was it just like you, or do you have employees, or has it grown over the years? Like, what's been the evolution of this?
So I do not have any employees. My husband, he actually brews for the Keweenaw Brewing Company.
Oh, okay.
And he puts in a lot of work for me. He helps me out. But what's awesome about yeast is that they are biological organisms. So as long as they're well kept and, made happy, make sure they have food, that their media is sterile, they do a lot of the work by multiplying. So it's just been me. I've had a business partner. He was a husband of a wife at Tech, or his wife worked for Tech, and then he helped me start the business through Smart Zone. So my company is a Smart Zone company where I took a course there on starting up a business.
Awesome.
And so I was kind of partnered up with a guy at the time. Currently, we're not working together anymore, so it's just my husband and I.
Okay.
That sling yeast.
So, from my understanding of the whole process, you kind of travel around the UP gathering different strains, right?
Yeah. Yep. So yeast traps all set up in different locations to.
Okay. So what is a yeast trap, or I guess how would you collect?
It's just a mason jar. So you use a mason jar. It's sterile. You fill it with a sterile medium. Typically for a beer, we'd use wort, and then you just cover it with cheesecloth to prevent airborne, or to prevent insects, for example, from climbing into your traps. Yeast is actually in the air all around us. So when we set these traps, we try and set them, in places that are outdoors. We don't want certain types of yeast, if you know what I mean. So we have these outdoor traps. We usually have them out pretty much in the middle of nature. And once the media in the jar gets cloudy, that means there's some sort of microbial growth in there. So then I'll take the traps back to the lab.
Okay. All right. So I don't want you to give away any of like your secret spots or anything, but like, what are some of the places, around the UP that you've kind of gathered yeast at?
So I have a friend in Marquette who's set up a few traps for me there, by like the Black Rocks, or in Eagle River, there's a beach, and I have a brewer friend from, he doesn't work for them anymore, but he was at Schmo's Brewing Company, which is a Michigan Tech alum brewery in Grand Rapids. But he was like, you have to go to this beach. The Fitz is on it, and it just smells yeasty. So out on the beach there on Lake Superior, that's where we captured the Eagle River ale yeast, and it's probably our top selling indigenous strain.
That's really cool. I like the idea of gathering these strains from right here in the UP. That's definitely cool. You've mentioned kind of top selling or different things like that. What are some of the like brewers or breweries that people might know? Some of the more notable ones. What some of the breweries have you worked with?
So I have done business with quite a few breweries. Some are more regular customers than others, because some people will just want to do an all Michigan beer. So they'll come to us for the yeast for that recipe. But homegrown brewing company. Let's see, a couple new ones that I Loaded Dice isn't even open yet, but I've just been working with those guys. And Final Gravity Brewing Company. The library up here in Houghton. I've worked with, let's see, I've had Rare Bird and the loading dock or the filling station,
Mm-hmm.
other breweries as well. I'm like drawing a blank as you ask me this right now.
That's okay. If
New
you think of
Holland
it
was
and
a
come
big one.
back to it. No, that's no
Okay.
problem. I understand. So another question I have is, okay, so you collect these strains, you have these traps out. Once you have them collected, like what do you do with them from there when you bring them back? What happens
Okay, so
next?
yep, I get these traps. They're all murky, if you will. I'll bring them
Okay.
back to the lab and use some basic microbiology techniques, such as pure culture technique, to separate the different species that live in that community or in that jar. So once I identify yeast species or yeast colonies that have flourished from the trap, then I'll do so I can do DNA sequencing. I do alcohol tolerance because in the brewery we want to make sure that we can control the organisms that we bring in. I do ale lager differentiation tests, and then we just brew with them. And sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a dumper, or you just no go.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
So like start to finish, how long is that process from like, okay, we trap to we can sell this to a client?
I would say probably about 2 to 3 weeks, if
Okay.
I'm really pushing it. I do offer these services also to breweries. There's, well, actually, the most recently, Iron Fish Distillery. They're in Traverse City area.
Yep.
Um, they've sent me grain, from their fields, so I've isolated yeast for them. So a lot of breweries also have proprietary strains, which I bank, but we'll do these projects with them independently, so
Oh,
they
okay,
can
that's
get their
interesting.
own.
So certain breweries, like that's just their strain, they're the only one that can use it.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess that makes sense. Like, if you've got like a certain flavor of beer, like I guess I would have never thought of like proprietary yeast. That's really
Right.
interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Um, so what is it about your yeast that makes these companies want to work with you? I'm guessing there's probably other companies out there that are like do what you do. I mean, there's got to be some competition, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some competition. There's the yeast giants, like Y Yeast and White Labs, in California,
Okay.
and some smaller yeast companies have popped up as well. But I think a huge advantage is that um, people want to use craft culture as yeast because I grow it up in small craft pitches, or I grow this yeast up to order, so it's never sitting around. It's fresh and pure per order. Also, the expertise, like being able to work with these clients or breweries or brewers more specifically, and build relationships with them. I think that's really cool.
Sure.
Something that being
So
small allows for.
the way I'm kind of like picturing it in my head is kind of like coming to you is almost like getting something from the farmer's market instead of going to like a chain store. Like it's way more fresh. It's like local to me.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Good analogy.
All right. Cool. So I'm all right. So I'm picturing this right.
Yep.
Um, I'm guessing. I mean, have they from as far as what I know of the craft beer industry, it seems like things have just like boomed. Has things kind of leveled off on that, or are things still growing crazy, or
I would say up until this pandemic began,
right?
things have been steadily growing. Our sales are down, I mean, right now, but it's because people aren't going out socializing at their local tap rooms so much.
Sure.
Um, yeah, otherwise I'd say the industry has been growing, but like with all industries, there is that cap, the
Right.
bubble burst. So, yeah, before the pandemic, I was still reaching out, pretty regularly, but not real recently.
Sure. Um, so besides like the pandemic and things kind of slowing down, what other sort of challenges do you kind of face with what you do?
I think so I love being in the UP, but I think being so, far the distance from a huge resource down, my clients downstate, I think that's a hurdle that I deal with constantly, is being wanting to go out marketing, wanting to go, make rounds. I also teach full time up here at the community college.
Okay.
So I don't get to go down as much as I'd like to. And Michigan is where my customer basis is, basically.
Sure. And I mean, without really knowing exactly what goes into the real like science behind the yeast process, I'm guessing some of that probably has to be a little bit difficult, like avoiding that contamination that you're talking about and like keeping that standard. I mean, is there quite a bit that goes into that?
Yeah, I do. I think basic microbiology techniques, where you learn, how to isolate and how to, have aseptic techniques so that you can avoid contamination. It comes pretty regularly. Fortunately, right now, fortunately, unfortunately, I don't have any employees. So, it's all on me. So
Sure.
making sure I use good technique.
Yeah. So you touched a little bit on the fact that, it's hard being a business here in the UP and kind of getting to some of those other spots. So I guess, what is it about the Upper Peninsula that, makes you want to stay here and live here and work here? What keeps you in the Upper Peninsula?
I would say probably the beauty in nature, and then the community I've built during my time here. Whether it be friends or colleagues, I have a pretty great group that I surround myself with up here. And then I love being outside. And so,
Awesome.
2 months out of the year, you get, it's nice and warm.
Yeah. Well, especially up there, you got to really like snow.
Right. And I do.
So when you're not like working and juggling your multiple jobs, you spend most of your time outside. Or, like, what are some of the things that you like to do when you're not like working?
Yeah, hiking. I just started fishing again.
Okay.
I had a baby in March, or February.
Oh,
February.
Congratulations.
So I'm busy with starting a family now. He keeps me pretty busy. Yeah.
So I'm assuming as a part of your job, you get to try some of these beers that your yeast cultures go into. So what would you say is your favorite one? Is it the Eagle River? I mean, you said that's the
that's probably one of, the best-selling indigenous strains, but I like the flavor and aromas that are produced by our rock cut ale yeast. They're a little bit more mild. All of these indigenous strains have this phenolic-y, spicy terroir. Like, it's just, I don't know, as of now, I'm calling it like Michigan's flavor.
Okay.
And it's unique. It's not, keen to a specific traditional beer style. It's unique in its own way. But the rock cut ale yeast, people have brewed IPAs with it, and it has this uniqueness to it, but it's not too crazy, far off from traditional styles. So
okay. The other thing I kind of wanted to ask you about is, are there a lot of other like females that are in the like brewing industry or doing what you're doing? I feel like there's such a big push for getting more females involved in STEM stuff. And so that's one thing that I think is awesome. So I'm curious to know if there's if you see a lot of other women like yourself in the industry or getting involved.
I do have a bunch of gal pals in the industry, and I would say, have you heard of Fermenta?
I have not. What enlighten me?
Okay, so Fermenta is a beer enthusiast group, and don't quote me on this, but I believe when it was formed, it was just females or focused on females. So that's where I made a lot of connections. Sure. I know that now it's just a beer enthusiast group, so male or female, anyone is welcome. But that's the group where I have met other women. I know it's male dominated. I spoke at the Michigan Brewers Conference maybe in 2014, 15, and it was just a room full of beards. Like, not a lot of ladies in attendance, but I'm hoping groups like Fermenta, and I know that there's like the Pink Boot Society. There are some initiatives to try and increase the presence of females.
Okay, that's awesome. we've kind of hit on a lot of the stuff that I really wanted to talk to you about. Is there anything that you felt like I missed or anything else you wanted to touch on more?
Um, no, I would probably just say that, yeah, what attracts me to the food industry is its collaborative nature. In the science world, there's a lot of competitiveness, and everyone just wants to make good beer. I see, seems to be. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because, I'm not very deeply immersed in the beer world, but the stuff that I do see and the friends that I do have that are a part of that world, it seems like if a brewery like is short on something or needs something, they can call another brewery that's close by and you guys help each other out. And it seems very, very collaborative and everybody's kind of all in it together, which is definitely cool to see.
Yep. I love that about it.
Awesome. So, all right. Well, then I have to ask you my final question that I ask everybody, and that's how do you like your pasty? Are you a ketchup person, gravy person, something
Yeah,
different?
I'm definitely a ketchup person.
Okay.
And I know it's supposed to be like a handy little sandwich, little pouch, but I like to I dice it up with, knife and fork and
Yeah.
just lather the ketchup on it. But
So, where's
yeah.
the hot spot to get a good pasty up in your neck of the woods?
Well, Roy's Bakery is my favorite. They have the traditional, pasty, but they also have one called Thanksgiving dinner. It's
Ooh.
delicious.
Okay. All right. Well, shout out to that bakery then. We'll give them a free plug. I always like to ask where the best spot is to
Right?
get one. So, well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. This has been really, really interesting. And I think a lot of other people will find it interesting because if there's one thing that we do well in the UP, it's drink some beer and talk about beer. So
You got that right.
all right. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.